My mother always said, "Family matters more than money." I believed her. Right up until the day I found out she had quietly erased me from my father's plans and taken our family home for herself. She expected tears, begging, maybe a guilt-filled visit where I clung to her and said, "You're all I have left." Instead, I hired an attorney and used her favorite thing in the world, paperwork, to take away the one thing she thought she'd won. This is how my mother lost the house she stole from me, and how I never had to raise my voice to do it. I'm the oldest child, the one who moved out of state, built a stable career, and became the person the family called whenever there was a crisis they couldn't solve with casseroles and gossip. If you ask my mother, she'll tell you I left. If you look at my bank transfers, you'll see something different. My name, over and over, attached to payments labelled roof repair, property tax, plumber, emergency fund. My father's name was the only one on the deed to the house. He was soft-spoken, patient, the kind of man who apologized just to keep the peace. He loved that house, that tired one-story place on a quiet street where we celebrated birthdays, holidays, and every awkward family moment for more than 30 years. He used to pat the doorway and say to me and my younger brother, "One day, if life ever knocks you down, this house will be here for you." Both of you, my mother heard the same sentence and translated it into something else. This house is my reward for everything I've suffered. She liked to describe herself as the one who sacrificed everything for this family. She controlled every dollar that came in, every bill that went out, and every conversation about the future. My brother stayed in town. He'd swing by for coffee, let her fold his laundry, and listen to her monologues about how no one appreciates her. In her story, he was the golden child, misunderstood, unlucky, but pure-hearted. I was the stable one, which in her mind meant I could be ignored until a bill showed up. When the roof started leaking after a storm, she called me, "Not him. Your father and I can't afford this, and your brother is struggling. If you don't help, we could lose the house." So I helped. When the county raised property taxes, she called again. "There's going to be a lien if we don't pay. You're the one with the good job. Please." So I paid. Year after year, thousands of dollars went into a house that didn't have my name anywhere near the title. The one thing my mother hated talking about was a will. Any time my father even hinted that he wanted to get the paperwork in order, she'd shut him down. "Stop talking like you're dying," she'd snap. "We're not old enough for that. God hears you." If I brought it up gently, she'd go cold. "The house is between your father and me," she'd say. "You kids will get what you get when we're gone. Don't start counting what isn't yours." I told myself she was just afraid of aging, of losing control. I didn't realize she was already planning to make sure that, on paper, nothing about that house was ever mine. My father's health declined faster than any of us wanted to admit. What my mother called a little fatigue turned out to be serious heart problems. One ER visit turned into an ICU stay full of machines, monitors, and doctors speaking in careful, measured tones. I flew in the next day. When I walked into his room, I saw something I wasn't ready for. My father looking small in a hospital bed, eyes heavy, hands shaking. I did what I always do. I organized. I talked to billing. I helped set up online access to his chart. I arranged remote work so I could stay longer. My mother, meanwhile, had her own agenda. The first time I saw the papers, it was late. My brother had gone home. Visiting hours were basically over, but the nurse let us stay a little longer. I came back from the hallway with a coffee and stopped in the doorway. My father was half propped up in bed, pen in his shaking hand. My mother stood over him, holding a clipboard with a thick stack of forms. When she saw me, she shifted the papers so I couldn't see the top page. "What's that?" I asked. "Insurance stuff," she said quickly. "You don't need to worry about it." His signature dragged across the line, uneven and barely legible. "Dad, you should rest," I said. "You can sign things when you're more awake." "This has to be done tonight," my mother snapped. "You don't understand how this works." "Go sit down." Hospitals generate paperwork constantly, so I tried to shrug it off. But once I noticed it, I kept seeing the pattern. She'd wait until I stepped out to talk to a doctor, or until my brother and I went to grab food. Every time we came back, there was another pen on the tray, another envelope on the chair, another look on my father's face that I couldn't read. When I finally confronted her in the hallway, she didn't even slow down. "What are you having him sign?" I asked. "Things that need to be signed," she shot back. "Your brother and I have it handled. You're just making this harder." "Your brother and I." It was a small phrase, but it landed like a stone. On good days, my father knew what was going on. On bad days, he didn't always know where he was. Those were the days she seemed most eager to get his signature. He never came home. He died on a Thursday. The funeral was exactly what you'd expect. Hugging people I barely recognized, listening to my mother talk about 40 years of marriage and building our life from nothing. She never mentioned any paperwork. I assumed there would be a will reading, a meeting with an estate lawyer, some formal moment where we sat down and heard what he'd decided. Instead, a few weeks later, I got a plain envelope from the county recorder's office. Inside was a copy of a legally recorded deed, my father's name as grantor, my mother's name as sole owner. No mention of me, no mention of my brother. Just a clean transfer. From him to her. That was it. The date next to his signature caught my eye. It was a day he'd been in the ICU, heavily medicated, barely able to hold a cup of water. My hands went cold. I called her. "What now? I'm busy?" she said. "I got a deed from the county," I said. "It shows the house in your name. Just yours. When did that happen?" "Your father wanted to make things simple," she said. "He didn't want you kids fighting over the house, so he put it in my name. That way I can decide what's best." "You mean that day in the hospital? When he could barely stay awake?" "Don't you dare accuse me of anything," she snapped. "There was a lawyer. It was all proper. He knew exactly what he was signing. He wanted me protected. You weren't here for his everyday life." "So legally, the house is only yours," I said slowly. "Yes. And later, when I'm ready, I'll figure out what to do. Maybe I leave it to your brother. Maybe I sell and help him get a better place. You already have your own life. Don't be greedy." In the background, I heard my brother. "Why are you stressing Mom out? Dad wanted her taken care of. You should be grateful." In that moment, something inside me went very quiet. I realized I wasn't a daughter in this story. I was a walking bank account that had outlived its usefulness. For a couple of days, I grieved that. Then the grief cooled into something else. If they wanted to treat me like a stranger when it came to the house, fine. I would respond the way a stranger would, not with begging, with paperwork. I didn't search, "How do I sue my mum?" I searched, "Deed signed in hospital ICU capacity, undue influence spouse real estate transfer, and challenge property transfer before death." The same phrases kept appearing, lack of capacity and undue influence. The more I read, the more familiar it sounded. So I found a real estate and probate lawyer and made an appointment. His office was ordinary, grey carpet and framed diplomas, but his expression while I talked was not. He didn't look surprised. If anything, he looked like he'd seen this movie before. I brought a folder, the recorded deed, my bank statements showing payments for the roof, taxes, and repairs, and copies of hospital records I'd downloaded from my dad's online portal before access closed. He read quietly, then tapped the date on the deed, and a matching date in the chart. On this day, he was in the ICU on sedating meds, disoriented, not capable of making complex decisions, he said. Is that enough? I asked. It's enough to raise serious questions, he replied. What I see here looks a lot like a classic case of undue influence over a medically fragile person. He outlined a plan. File a petition in probate court to set aside the deed. Argue that my father lacked mental capacity when he signed. Argue that my mother exerted undue influence. Record a lis pendens. A notice in the property records that the house is under litigation, so my mother couldn't quietly sell or refinance it. Subpoena the full hospital chart, nursing notes, medication logs, and any records from the notary who witnessed the signing. Before I signed the retainer, he asked, "Do you want your mother punished, or do you want this corrected?" "I want the paperwork to match the life my father thought he was living," I said. "Not the version my mother forced at the end." I signed. I didn't warn her. I just let the legal process start. Piece by piece, the story changed from Dad took care of Mum to Mum pushed Dad into something he was in no condition to understand. My mother finally found out when she tried to sell the house. A friend in town called to say there was a for sale sign in the yard and that my mother was talking about a big move, but also a title problem that had her furious. A day later, my phone lit up. The second I answered, she was already shouting, "What have you done? The title company says there's some kind of lawsuit tied to the house. The buyers are backing out. They said the property is under a cloud. Did you do this?" "Yes," I said calmly. "My attorney recorded a lis pendens. It means the court is reviewing how you got the house. Anyone thinking of buying it deserves to know that." "How could you do this to your own mother?" "After everything I've done for you." "I'm not doing anything to you," I said. "I'm asking the court whether what happened in that ICU was legal." "You're trying to steal my home." "No," I said. "I'm trying to stop you from stealing ours." The next time we were in the same room, it was a small courtroom. She sat with her attorney, dressed in black, clutching a tissue, my brother at her side. They glared at me like I'd committed a crime. I sat with my attorney and a stack of binders. It wasn't dramatic like TV. It was slower, quieter, more surgical. The attending doctor testified that on the date of the deed, my father was in the ICU, heavily medicated, mentally disoriented, and that he would not have recommended signing major legal documents in that state. The nurse testified that my mother brought in the papers, that my father's hand shook, that he looked exhausted, and that when she suggested waiting, my mother insisted it had to be done that night. My bank records showed years of me paying to keep the house afloat. My mother testified that my father was clear, that this was his wish, and that she was only honouring what he wanted. Her attorney called it a family matter, and said bringing it to court was cruel. My attorney didn't raise his voice. "Your Honour," he said, "we're not asking you to referee family emotions. We're asking whether a deed signed in an ICU by a heavily medicated man, facilitated by the sole beneficiary, should stand." The judge reviewed the evidence. "For a deed to be valid," he said, "the grantor must understand the nature and effect of the transaction, and the transfer must be free from undue influence. Based on the medical records and testimony, I find that Mr. H did not meet that standard, and that the circumstances support a finding of undue influence." He signed the order. The deed, transferring the property solely to Mrs. H, is set aside. The house returns to the decedent's estate to be distributed according to probate law. No sale or encumbrance of the property may occur without consent of all heirs or further court order. One document replaced another. On paper, I existed again. My mother didn't lose everything. She still got her legal share of my father's estate. She still lived in the house, at least for a time, because any decision to sell now had to be mutual. What she lost was absolute control. She couldn't dangle the house over our heads anymore. She couldn't threaten to cut us out if we disagreed with her. She couldn't quietly cash out and disappear. My brother will tell you I dragged Mum through court. He doesn't mention the night she dragged a notary into the ICU. My mother and I still talk, technically. Holidays, birthdays, short, polite conversations where we pretend the house is just a building and not a symbol of everything that went wrong. I used to miss the illusion of the mother I thought I had, the one who would never put property over her children. Now I understand that illusion cost me more than any retainer fee. Here's what I learned. People will use love as a costume for their greed. They'll say, family first, while quietly moving your name off the paperwork. But documents don't play favorites. They don't care who cried harder at the funeral. They don't care who shows up with tissues and speeches. They just say what they say. My mother wanted that house so badly, she was willing to turn me into a legal stranger to get it. All I did was remind the court, and her, that I wasn't a stranger. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't stage a scene in the driveway. I read the records. I followed the paper trail. And I put my own name on the right line as someone who refused to quietly disappear. And if you think what my mother did was bad, wait until you hear what my aunt tried. In my next story, I'll tell you how she forged my grandmother's will, marched into probate court like she'd already won, and then lost everything because of one clause she didn't read carefully. If you want to see what happens when greed collides with fine print, watch. My aunt forged Grandma's will. One clause ended her game.